Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. I'm Peter Bracketsellis, and I'll be your host today to our webinar, an introduction to Microsoft Azure Analytics services. I welcome each of you. I know there's quite a few people already joined us. I work within the Microsoft 365 and Azure Cloud and infrastructure team here at Professional Advantage as a member of our business development team. I'll be joined very shortly by my co-host and keynote presenter today, a senior technology leader within our reporting, analytics, and data team, an esteemed technical senior member of our technical community. This is a joint collaboration between our two respective practice teams. I'll introduce him shortly. Today's webinar represents our third and final of our three-part Azure webinar series. I know some of you have I recognize some names that have joined us in our previous episodes. We have been running since late 2021. And today we are introducing Azure Analytics Services, which is one of the flagship platform as a service offerings within the Azure Cloud stack of capabilities and services. In parts 1 and 2, some of you may recall that who attended or are listening to this recording will recall we covered in episode 1 back to basics, foundational pillars of Azure Cloud. And in episode 2, we covered how to enable better business resilience, especially very topical over the last couple of years, supporting the distributed hybrid workplace. So this rounds out our Azure Cloud story at the value layer of the Azure Cloud stack, the data estate layer, as we call it, the top of the stack. So we have some great content and learnings we have packaged into today's webinar, so strap in for the next 40 or so minutes. I don't think I need to reintroduce myself, just to say that one of my main roles at PA is to identify opportunities for transformation or infrastructure and application optimization with clients in the small to medium size sector that we focus on. The data estate cuts across both the Microsoft 365 and Azure Cloud stacks. And so hopefully today there's something in it, and there's the consulting teams sit behind me. So I am going to be a small part of today to open up and close out. Greg, I want to introduce Greg, who's my co-host. He is proudly serving his 20th or 19th year here at PA, an esteemed senior member of our technical community. He's a senior business BI consultant and data warehouse focused on implementing BI solutions, scoping them, defining them, and leading the implementation of them, either with our internal team or with customer teams, as well as enterprise data warehouse or organizational data warehouses, and driving actionable insights out of customers' data sets. So prior to PA, he had extensive experience as a ERP consultant, specializing in Microsoft Dynamics GP, especially in the procurement and service-based industries. Next, we would like to take this opportunity before we proceed further to take a moment on all of our behalves to make an acknowledgement of country and the land we present this webinar on. We begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of which we meet today and pay our respects to the elders past and present. We further extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples online with us today, participating in our event. So we thank you graciously. Before I ask Greg to take over, we would like to get a feel for each of you, where each of you are at in your respective data estates. And the question we ask now to you is, and we're going to do a little poll just to get us started. What is the single most pressing challenge facing your organization today? I'll give you 15 to 20 seconds. You should have a screen in front of you now with 4 options or 4 key challenges. So if you would like to vote by clicking on any of those circles, that I know you may have some more than one, but for the sake of this exercise, if you can pick up the most pressing one that's top of mind, that'll give Greg some idea of where you're at, each of you are at in your respective journeys, and then I guess take that into account as he presents the content he has. So Nora, how did that voting measure up? We'll close that poll now. So what do we got here? Interesting. So nearly 77% is integrity and governance issues, sources of truth. You have no problem extracting data from your source systems. Looks like the majority have integrity issues with quality and complexity. Almost as it's interesting, the split. Data governance, single source of truth, we hear over and over, and creating actionable insights. Sometimes it's easy to get insights, but are they actionable? Do you have the quality of data to make sure that the right business is? So that's really good, Greg. Now I'm sure Greg values that, and I have pleasure in inviting Greg to our virtual stage and introducing our agenda. Greg, over to you.
Thank you, Peter. I'm just going to say welcome to our audience today. As Peter has said, I'm hoping today that we can go through fairly quickly our webinar, and I'm really wanting to talk about modern data analytics and just the real simple parts. So for our agenda, I want to talk about why. What are the drivers that want us to move to modern data analytics? I'm going to talk about the what does it look like when we're moving and we're growing in our data analytics journey as an organization, and then talk about the how. We're going to discuss sort of the data analytics architecture and how the Azure services really match the architecture that we have, and there is such a breadth of Azure services that we can talk about. And lastly, we're just going to have questions and next steps. So let's get into the presentation. I'm just going to switch my my camera off for a second. So the big question is why? We're all part of an organization, and we're trying to drive growth and profitability within our organization. And the fundamental question about moving to modern data analytics really is about this question. Does your data enable you to make informed decisions, business decisions quickly? And these could be actionable insights. We know that data has a cost, whether that is an opportunity cost. If you're not investing in your data, it's still costing you that manpower and that opportunity of revenue that you've lost. We also know that data has changed. We're seeing a movement of SMBs moving from on-premise systems to cloud-based systems. We're seeing data that is structured, unstructured, and semi-structured. And so there's a different sort of type of data that's coming out, where we're looking at social media information, we're looking about sentiment analysis, and we're looking at data and images. And what we also want as an organization is we want a more comprehensive set of our data. So we want to look at our marketing data, our search data, our website data, our operational data. And we want to look at that all together and have that comprehensive 360-degree view. And so if I drill really into why, and that question of why, what we see is a number of reasons, and I'm just going through them quickly. The first thing is we want to really leverage these modern data analytics tools, and we talk about business intelligence, and I've done a number of webinars on Power BI as a business intelligence tool. But essentially the goal for business intelligence software is that we want our data to give us insight, to enable us to have actionable insight. So it's action. And there's been this growth in graphically rich and interactive tools that can enable end users to really get those actionable insights quickly. The other thing that we see is there's been an emergence of advanced analytics use cases, machine learning, data science, and real-time streaming. And essentially, these can be within reach of an SMB, and increasingly so. Okay. Another reason is certainly the cloud strategy, and this is part 3 of our webinar series. And that cloud strategy, has a number of benefits regarding security, cost, scalability, and availability. But from a data perspective, we really want to look at what going to the cloud benefits an organization with. And from my perspective, it's really that separation of compute and storage services. So we can be more targeted in terms of how we can tailor a solution for you. For example, we can have our less demanding data stored in fairly affordable places in the cloud, while your more demanding and business critical data is stored in areas where it is easily and quickly available. And we also see, I guess, the movement from organizations into SaaS-based systems. So for us, it would be a customer moving to Business Central, or a customer moving to other cloud-based infrastructure like a CRM, and them having difficulties actually extracting that data out. And I guess the last point there is there are some customers that have legacy on-premise data warehouse systems that want to move that into the cloud. So if we really get into the data side of this why question, it really is about data integrity and data governance. And when an organization grows, essentially it goes through these growing pains. And we talk about consolidating multiple data sources. We talk about having large data volumes. We talk about data quality and really how we need to cleanse the data and bring it together. And we talk about complexity. And we can have in our data what we call slow changing dimensions that are not easily, they're not in our source system, so we have to sort of construct those within our data architecture. And of course, we can talk about our unstructured data sources. Another reason really is these governance issues. So what we want to do is have that single source of truth. We have multiple people looking at the same sets of data, and we want to have them to have the access to that data with the proper security and privacy protections that is required. So, and then when we talk about our Azure services, we're going to look at how the Azure services really fit into all of these types and match these real reasons that we have. Okay, so if that's the why, let's talk about the what. And let's talk about really, if our goal is to make informed or actionable business decisions, we need to look through our organization in terms of a data maturity model and how the organization becomes more effective in their data decision making. And this model has been around for quite a while in various forms. And what this model really visualizes is the business impact of using our data more effectively and the investment required. Okay, and so there is a range and a continuum of this which we'll sort of talk through. The first maturity model is what we would call data aware, and most small or startup businesses would be at that model. They may be using a small financial system like MYOB and driving their operations through Excel. As they grow larger and outgrow these systems within a large organization or larger organizations, you can see, some of the descriptive words, it becomes chaotic. And they have siloed data. And they're really unaware of the total data in their decision making, which can lead to disagreements in terms of, what is the true source of data. And if we talk about the analysis, what we call that analysis is descriptive. It's really just what happened. If we move to the next sort of data maturity level, we talk about what we call data capable. And I've given it a fairly descriptive word where it is called death by dashboards. And an organization in this area has made investments in bringing their data together, and they have multiple systems, and they may have multiple teams accessing and sharing that same data, and it's really there are less and less manual process. There is some standardization in the tools, so they all may be using one particular analytics tool, and there is an increase in trust and clarity into the data. And the way we describe that analysis is diagnostic. So they know not only what happened, but why did it happen. The third level is what we call data adept. I've called it data tells a story. And really, it's an organization that has integrated data within their entire organizations. They have agile data models, and they're uncovering new insights on a regular basis. They may have a regular data team, and they're exploring machine learning and data science, and looking at predictive models. And as I said, the analysis there is predictive, not only what happened and why did it happen, but what is going to happen or what will happen. And really the last stage of this model is what we call data-driven. And it is a transform organization where the data culture drives their business. They're very sophisticated in their insights and they have strategic and continuous innovation in that data area, which is critical to their success. And really, data is an operational area within their business, and it is very high functioning with data governance and compliance. And so when we talk about what type of analysis there is, it's very prescriptive. How can we make this happen? How can we make, from our data, how can we make the next future of our business happen? Okay, so really from this data model, we really wanted to say to you, you may be at level 1 and 2, and I've suggested you probably, if you're attending this webinar, you probably are, but it's really good to self-assess you at this level and go, well, what is the business investment and what are the benefits for me moving to that next level? Maybe we have departments in various levels. You may have departments in data aware and some departments in data capable. And the next step is, possibly becoming data adept and bringing that all together. So now we have a poll question, and so we talked about the data maturity model, and as I said, there are those 4 models, and essentially what we wanted to do was to see where you're at with that. And so model 1 is what I would call chaotic, standardized, integrated, and at the end, it's really the optimized one.
So we would value if everybody voted, and we'll see where everybody lands. Be courageous, honest. There's no right and wrong answer here for Greg or for us. And the good news is maybe in 12 months' time when you run this self-assessment again, it'd be interesting, depending on what action you've taken from today or in the next 12 months, where would you land in 12 months' time? Some people would like to go up one step. Some maybe want to land at a certain step. Looks like everybody is already at standardized, Greg. Seems to be at least a good baseline to work from. Unless awesome. Everybody's not telling the truth, but it's an honesty system here. So good data. It's good data. It probably sets the tone for the rest of the presentation.
Awesome. So let's move on from that. So the next part of the presentation, really we want to talk about the how. And I want to give you sort of a bit of a background about what we call our data analytics structure. If you're in more that integrated part, you're on this path already. And so I'm sort of going over this again, but for the people sort of in that chaotic and that data aware part, we want to just go through this data analytics structure. And really what we want to say is that our data goes on a journey. And we go on that journey in terms of, we see it as a funnel, and that funnel really is the data moving from the left and the right. So we start off with large amounts of raw data, and that data by itself doesn't mean anything, but it goes through these process stages. So it goes through an ingestion stage and a storage stage. It goes through a data warehousing stage where we have cleansed that data and want to store that data somewhere. The next stage really is the data model, where we're bringing together the relationships. And the last part of that, and the part that people see at the end, is really that visualization. And that's where we see the value from this whole data architecture. Okay. And just at the end, I just wanted to show you, I guess, the data roles that fit in with that type of data architecture. Okay. So what we do is, sometimes this data architecture doesn't mean much. And what we try to do is to have sort of this food analogy description of this data architecture. And so we want, when you go and sit down and have a nice meal at a restaurant, really the end presentation is what you're seeing. You're seeing the atmosphere of the restaurant. You're seeing the presentation of the food, what it looks like, and you're actually tasting food, getting that texture and flavor. Really what we want to see is in that data architecture, in that food process that we go through of procurement, of chopping and pre-cooking, of earlier in the day, and then we go in once we're doing the service for our meal. We start the cooking and we assemble it and we serve and consume that. And so from that data analogy, that really matches up to our data journey. And so we have our data sources. They're our raw data sources. We need to put them somewhere. So we actually extract them and stage them somewhere. We need to actually prep that data and put that data somewhere prior to us really getting into it and modeling it. So we transform that into our data warehouse. We then go into our data model and we create and define those measures. We create those visualizations, and ultimately we want to serve and consume that. And so let's, and so I really wanted to make sure that we understood the various stages of this data analytics architecture, so that we can understand when we put the services, the Azure services to that, what that looks like. Okay, so if we look at our data analytics architecture, I just want to talk about where we've come from and where we're going. So if we talk about where we've come from, typically our data analytics structure has been on premise, and we've used structured data, and you can see for the various parts there, our data sources have generally been SQL based or Excel based, and we've used one tool to do our ingestion, data warehousing, data modeling, and that has been Microsoft's SQL Server. And SQL Server has had that total package of those services where we've been able to do that extraction, what we call ETL. We do the storage and we've done the modeling in there. And typically where we've got to the visualizations side, it's been Excel, it's been reporting service, and possibly other tools. And those have been served and consumed in a limited sphere of our desktop using, Excel and possibly an Outlook. We're always going to be emailing something. When we turn to what the modern and a cloud data analytics looks like, we have a lot more data sources. We essentially have not only our SQL and on-premise data sources, but we've got, our social media, we've got SaaS-based data sources, and I've just put a number of icons there. What we do is we use different tools. We have data ingestion tools, and we store that in our staging area in what we call a data lake, which is an ELT process. So it's extract, load, and transform. And so that is different to, I guess, the older way of ETL, extract, transform, and load for SQL. And so our data lake becomes sort of the staging area where all of our data sits. Excuse me. What we then do is to bring the data that we want, the mission critical data, the data that we want our analytics on, and put that in a database, do that transformation there. And so from a modern perspective, we can see from a modeling perspective that our analytics options have now sort of increased or expanded. And so we have advanced analytics, we have machine learning, we have data science, that now a modern cloud analytics can look at. And then we can visualize that either in our modern tools. And so I've just got a couple of tools there, and we certainly have self-service. But service and consumption really has also expanded where we can do mobile. We have collaboration tools, we have like Teams, and we can essentially have our data anywhere. Okay, so that's just a snapshot of where we've come from and where we're going to.
Greg, can I just grab you for a sec?
Yep.
On that slide, when you say Teams, I know some of the audience may say, well, how does that work with Teams? You're saying some of these reports, be they straight out report or a dashboard or a scorecard, can be surfaced in a Teams environment through one of the tabs at the top, or is that what you're alluding to?
Yeah, look, see, Power BI essentially has a lot of integration points into Teams, and so and what Microsoft are doing is really enabling people using all of their tools to interact with them in a much closer basis. So in my Teams app, I can see Power BI. I have a Power BI icon, so I can go straight to my service, or I can mention, some reports in my conversations, and those types of integrations. In fact, Power BI is becoming more integration now into Outlook and into Office. So
Yes.
it's just a journey that Microsoft are really going on here.
And also, those reports and visualizations can also be embedded in a SharePoint page or a site or a hub. And we're seeing more and more of our solutions and customers expecting that as you surface data sets out of the Dynamics systems of record like GP or Business Central or non-Microsoft data ERPs and CRMs, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great, thanks.
Look, and so what we want to do now in the how is to look at the Azure Analytics services and really map them against the stages in our data analytics. And we want to do now is to see that through the lens of the maturity, the data maturity that we may be at and may want to get to. Okay, so we know we have our analytics architecture, we have data sources, ingestion stage, and we go through here. So if we spoke about that first model in the data maturity, so we're primarily, we may only have like a single source, an ERP, and we're looking at, and we're using spreadsheets. Well, the question is, can I get modern data analytics over that data right now? And do I need to go through these stages? Well, the answer to that question is, if you're at that data aware level, and you're wanting to get data analytics, you can actually get it right now. And what we see is customers that are at that lower maturity, they're putting Power BI directly over those systems. And there certainly are limitations with that, but Power BI really has a function set that will enable organizations to to get their analytics quickly and in a cost-effective manner. And so what we can see there is you can use Power BI over that entire ingestion data warehouse data model visualization stage, certainly at the end. And we can serve and consume Power BI in Power BI through Excel, export to Excel, in Teams and in SharePoint. Even if you have large amounts of data, really, we have what we call data flows in Power BI, which are really a baby data warehouse where we can import the data using Power Query into these data flows and then bring them into Power BI. And there's really a large area of clients that you can use Power BI, from the small, single-digit organization over to that large organization, which we would say is we can use Power BI Premium. Okay, so if the question is, can I get data analytics now at a low level? The answer is certainly. We can just use Power BI over it. So as we increase in our maturity and as we have more data sources that we need to bring together, say a CRM and an ERP, what do we generally use? And so within Azure, and traditionally in the start of this sort of cloud part and what Microsoft has done in Azure, we have different services that apply at each level of our data architecture. Okay, so for our ingestion and staging, we generally use Azure Data Factory, and Azure Data Factory provides that low-code, no-code pipeline type service where we can draw data out of our source systems, out of our Excel, through APIs, out of all of our systems, and put them somewhere. And that somewhere generally is in the data warehouse level, a SQL Server or a data lake. And we'll talk about data lakes a bit more, but traditionally, if you'd have a SQL Server on premise, we would bring it into an Azure SQL Server. And then on top of that, from our modeling and visualization perspective, we would then put that over Power BI. Okay, and Power BI is the tool that does that modeling and visualization, and again, serving and consuming in those modern ways. I've also got an example of where if you already have a on-premise data warehouse system, we can actually lift and shift those services into the cloud, into the Azure cloud, using the similar services: Data Factory, Azure SQL Server, Azure Analysis Services, and Power BI. So really there are a number of, and these are sort of the basic options that we would use to that. So as you can see, low maturity, growing maturity, these are the types of tools that you would use in there. Now, really, and I'm just looking at time, I think we're going fairly well for time here.
Yeah, we're ahead of schedule, Greg.
That's cool.
You're doing good. You're doing good.
So I might just pause, take a breather, and have some water.
Sure. The best is yet to come in the second half.
Well, there's not much to go, really, is there?
We're in the home stretch. We'll even have
certainly in the home stretch. Look,
yeah.
So there has been increasing marketing activity, and there has been increasing talk from Microsoft about sort of the next generation of, Azure Data Analytics services. And what that really is called Azure Synapse Analytics. And that's really the next generation of analytics services. And just as a bit of background, Azure Synapse Analytics hasn't been around for a long time. It was launched in late 2019. And it was essentially built upon the Azure Data Warehouse Cloud offering. And what I would say is that it was initially aimed at larger organizations with big data, organizations that had fairly mature data, fairly mature at a data level. But what we're seeing now is Microsoft are really investing heavily in Azure Synapse. And there is this movement that their services within Synapse is being aimed more towards the SMBs and to that smaller end of the market. And let's just go through, I guess, the benefits of Synapse and what it can do. And so the first thing about Synapse is really it is a unified end-to-end solution and platform. And what we saw in the prior slide is that we had separate Azure solutions to get to these, to do these types of things, and we had to go to different areas. So for data, we had to go to Data Factory for ingestion. We had to go to the SQL Server for our data warehousing, and then we had to go into Analysis Services or Power BI for our modeling. What Azure Synapse allows to do is to have that one workspace that does it all, and it not only does it all for like our SQL Server in the sort of the older way, but it really takes into account the newer technologies of that cloud and data lake area. And one of the coolest things that Azure Synapse does as a tool is that it allows us to actually look at our data in our data lake in an easy way. And if you are like a SQL person, essentially allows you to run SQL queries over your data lake. That is a real game changer in terms of people looking at their data. Okay. The next thing that it does is it really has scalable data warehousing, and what we're seeing is it certainly had an offering in the large business, the large data end of town, where it has this dedicated SQL database. But we're now seeing new features in terms of Azure Synapse that enables us to use what we call serverless and to essentially now build a data warehouse in our data lake, which is sort of the cheapest or the more cost-effective area for our data. Okay, and so that is a great area, an emerging area where we can now sort of do our data warehousing in the data lake and take advantage of those cost efficiencies there. Another great thing that Microsoft is doing is what we call Synapse Link, and they're really bringing operational analytics into Synapse without what we call the ingestion and the ELT. So what we're seeing here is that Synapse now has links to the Dataverse, so we can automatically or very easily export data out of our dynamic CRM system into the Dataverse, into the data lake, and let Synapse look at that data without any type of ingestion. It is also happening over Cosmos DB if you're using Cosmos DB on top of like a modern application. And very soon, it is going to have what we call Synapse Link over SQL, so over a SQL database. So there's some very exciting things that are happening there as well. Now, when we talk of Synapse Analytics, the other great thing is that it really has integrated machine learning and integrated functionality that allows us to do our data science and advanced analytics. So Synapse allows us to technically bring up Spark engines and to actually do data analysis using our Python tools and all those types of things. And I guess the last things is it really has seamless integration with Power BI and that security and compliance there. So if we look at our various stages in our data analytics data architecture, and we look at it from a small and a large perspective, here's what we see. Okay, so again, we have our data sources, and we've spoken about our data sources. But if we look in the smaller area, what we see here is that really Synapse is the tool that we use for all of those areas. And so in our ingestion, we have what we call Synapse pipelines, which is similar to Data Factory. And we have what we discuss, Synapse Links, and that data gets stored in our data lake, which is a really quite affordable data storage area there. When we get to our data warehouse, we can either use what we call Synapse Serverless, or we can create what we have is what we call now a data lakehouse. So we can do some sort of data warehousing within the lakehouse, within our data lake. And then what we can do is when we look at our data model, we can use Synapse to actually create our Power BI data models there, or Synapse itself, and push that on into the visualization there. Okay, and so then when we talk about how that differs from a larger type of organization with bigger data, essentially what they would use is that data warehouse piece there would change. So essentially they would still use their pipelines, get their data staged in their data lake, but really what they're wanting to do now is to get their business critical and mission critical data into what we call a dedicated SQL pool. That data is massively parallel and can be massively scalable. And so essentially, if you've got lots of data coming in, Azure and that cloud benefit allows you to just scale up the compute resources to do that processing, virtually immediately for you. And then what you see then is, from a data model perspective, you can use Synapse to do that machine learning and data science and push it on into Power BI and get that serving and consuming area. So this is, I guess, the new emerging area of Azure Data Services. You'll be hearing a lot more about Synapse Analytics, and it's something that we as an organization are looking down to enable more cost-effective analytics for our customers. The last thing I just want to talk to you there is about Azure Purview, and that really is a dedicated data governance tool that has come on board recently that allows organizations to not only catalog their data, but to really manage the accessibility and security of that. And so as a growing organization, that's also a service that you may want to use to put on top of Synapse or put on top of your other services to go there. So I think essentially that is sort of the intro to the Azure Data Analytics services that I wanted to go through. If you certainly have questions, we'll be available after to look at that. I think we're going well with time, Peter. So
we are, Greg. We are indeed.
Look, just wanted to talk about next steps, really, and we talked about the why. As an organization, we just want actionable insights, and we want them quickly, and they move the velocity of our business so we can make faster, easier, quicker decisions for our organization. We talked about, what does it look like, and moving from one maturity level to the next maturity level, and how we want to move from that chaotic to standardized, or how we want to move from diagnostic analytics to predictive analytics, and the investment level required. And really, that's what we're talking about. We want to say, what is the value to you? Are you getting And we want you to get multiple of returns of that type of investments, that better, faster decisions, that automation and that data governance. That's what we want to see. And really, it wants to be a cost-effective investment. So with Azure and that cloud part, we can really choose the best fit and scale those services to your organization. As your organization grows, you can certainly scale those services. And just talk about that opportunity cost of no change. So if you're sitting at that first level of that chaotic level, we really want you to say, well, what is the next step? What am I missing out on? What's that opportunity cost? And certainly we want you to come with us and discuss your requirements with us. So I'll hand it back to you, Peter, to discuss.
Thanks, Greg. I'll just finish off on that. As you can see, we've got about 5 minutes to go, so we've got some time for questions. I know a couple have come through privately even before the event, so I'll ask that. I just want to reinforce the 2-hour discovery session, that at the end of today's session, you can put your hand up to have time with someone like Greg or other members of the data team as a complimentary offer for you to at least move to the next step in your own journey and move up the maturity curve if that is a business outcome that makes sense for you. The questions now, if you want to move on, Greg, to the next stage. So with that call to action, you can go to that website, the link, if you click on there, and you can register your expression of interest for us to follow up and maybe schedule some time. Couple of questions, Greg, if I can pose to you, because I'm sure it's on a lot of people's minds. What would you consider to be top business benefits and technical limitations of just using Microsoft's, I guess, flagship data visualization tool, Power BI, over our customers' current data sets, both structured and unstructured? I know you've touched on it, but just reinforce that.
Yeah, look, we certainly put Power BI over just directly over the data sources for our customers, and it is certainly cost effective, and in some respects we do it as like a proof of concept. So where an organization sort of needs to see the proof in the pudding, Power BI over those sources certainly can start that make that decision in terms of starting that investment. In terms of limitations, really Power BI and using Power BI alone, if you're getting sort of more data complexity, you're bringing multiple data sources together, you need that data cleansing there. Certainly Power BI can do it, but to a limited extent, and certainly if you have large amounts of data, the performance sort of decreases with the more and more data that you have. When we extract out of cloud-based systems, there are certainly limitations where organizations or cloud providers, like Business Central, cloud providers will sort of restrict how many API calls we can make, and so we see some performance issues where we connect directly to cloud sources, and so it's much better to sort of data warehouse those and ingest them and all of those types of things first. But certainly, we can certainly talk through a strategy with customers about how best they can use both Power BI and introduce the investment required for the organization to invest in like that, the analytics architecture.
Great. I'm sure that that would be something everybody can take away today. We have got time for one more, and I haven't seen anything come through on the question box yet, in addition to the two I've got. What are the typical, in your experience with some of our SMB customers, typical upfront costs or next step costs in implementing a cluster or the entire analytics services stack? actually, that's not fair. Just in implementing analytic services cloud-based, can you speak to your experience around a typical SMB with regards to, hey, how much of our consulting would be necessary? And that's, I know that's how long is a piece of string, and what the in-house capability of the organization is, whether they have an outside partner that works with them and they just need to upskill them, and what additional licensing entry point. It's not hundreds of thousands of dollars to get started if you haven't gone down this path yet. Yeah, quick 1 minute.
That's the $1 million question, really, isn't it? Look, I guess the first question is there are services involved, and really it needs to be tailor fit to your organization.
Right.
And we need to look at your data and what data transformations and the complexity of your data. That's probably the biggest factor there. And then when we look at, I guess, the Azure services, and if I start, I guess, from the back end, Power BI, in my opinion, is a really cost-effective data analytics tool. Like paying $150 a year per user is just ridiculous compared to its competitors, essentially. And so really that is a major point there. But when we talk about, I guess, the other parts of that architecture, the ingestion, the storage, and the modeling in that stage, what we want to say is we want to tailor a solution that suits your organization requirements and their future requirements, and that could be from the lowest end. As I said, if you use Synapse Analytics to really just do some of that serverless ingestion, you're just paying for the pay-as-you-go ingestion and the data costs, all the way up to if you're wanting to spin up a dedicated SQL database in Synapse, that's going to cost you multiple thousands. So we want to really get you a solution that is best for you right now and in the future, using the various array of services, and getting a cost-effective and affordable solution for you. I hope that makes sense.
Sure does. Thanks for that. That wraps up the Q&A session formally. All I have to do now is just wrap it up. Again, I emphasize in our chat box, our back end team have put the link to that call to action for today if anybody wants to take advantage of our offer. Also from today, who to contact. For some of you that are already clients, you have a PA account manager, approach them. If you've got any further questions or any further queries, or anybody in our in Greg's team, the reporting, analytics and data team, or as a catch-all, myself, the number is on the screen right now, and my email address. I can serve you as a last resort or a first resort, whichever you like. Please consider the eval as you leave us today, and look forward to seeing you again shortly in upcoming webinars. And we all, the event production team that sits in behind Greg and me, Greg and myself, hopefully that has been content that can help you move up the maturity curve from where you are today, give you more insight to what's down the road, what Microsoft's doing, what we're doing with clients, and provide some models and some framework to make some decisions about how healthy and efficient your own data estate and your analytics platform is. So wishing you a very good afternoon, and thank you again.